Um, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Marcus Vinicius Neder, for inviting me here. And I'm so far away from my country, but Joao, believe me or not, I feel like at home today with you, because even if this point was omitted from my curriculum, my first position was actually tax inspector as the Italian Revenue Service. It was something like 1996, 97. It was my first appointment after graduation, and I still remember that on the very first day when I took my position at the Italian Revenue Service in my country, we were gathered together in a room which was similar to this one, with the only exception of the ceiling, and we were called to raise our right hand, to swear loyalty to the Republic, and etc. and etc. etc. So it's really like feeling at home. But of course, I'm not here as a former tax inspector of my country. And to be honest, I'm not here even like a full-time academic, but I'm just here and like an Italian, like many thousand Italian that came in this country before me, with only two things to do: to share my experience with you and help perhaps you to improve your understanding or your concept or your idea about a general anti-avoidance rule. So first of all, I think that we have to understand the environment we are talking about. Yesterday afternoon and this morning, we challenged a number of concepts, including the lack of business purpose, the abuse of law, avoidance, the false leges. I think that perhaps in our point of view, in my point of view, all these concepts, all these principles and ideas are faces of the same dice. In a number of cases, our Supreme Court, the Corte di Cassazione, used the concept of abuse of law or general anti-avoidance rule, just like the words say. They say, well, we use the abuse of law doctrine, being that doctrine, being that principle, our general anti-avoidance rule, full stop. Perhaps that's not entirely accurate. Perhaps this is not appropriate from a theoretical point of view, and Professor Schueri yesterday was very convincing for me and very accurate on that. But this is the experience that we are having today in Italy. And I think that in order for you to understand what's happening in the old continent and in the old country, you have to take into account two very important aspects. The first one are the cultural aspects of a legal doctrine, and the second one, the technical aspect concerning taxation law. Because, you know, perhaps in Brazil is the same, they both play a fundamental role in the decision-making of our Supreme Court. And it's difficult, in my opinion, not that correct, to talk about a general anti-avoidance rule in Italy, considering only the law as you find it on the books, the black letter law. But you have also to consider the framework, the landscape, where our principles are developed and are flourishing. And of course, being in Italy, the definition that we had of avoidance and of abuse of the law date back to the Roman law and to the Roman age. I think I can understand what are you thinking about. Probably some of you are thinking, oh my God, is he really going back to the Romans to give his presentation? Did he really understood that he has only 30 minutes? Yes, I know they got the 30 minutes and I won't stay too much on this point, but it's just to give you the idea of what are the roots of the concept that we are using today. And when we think about and when we talk about avoidance or abuse of law, well, as a matter of fact, we have the first definitions of these concepts, something like 1,500 years ago in the Corpus Juris, in the civil law developed by the Romans, by the late Romans, by the emperors. And so the first concept of avoidance, well, my dear friend, it was not pointed at taxation law, but was a sort of catch-all principle, good for civil law, for commercial law, and for taxation law as well. But as I told you, we in Italy tended to consider the law as one. and we try and use the same concepts in civil, commercial, whatever law as much as possible. There is a very strong interaction in this respect. That's why avoidance is the behavior of those who, it's the behavior of the individual who, without infringing the word of the law, deceived the purpose of it. And again, another part of the Roman law focusing on this is taken again by Gilpianus, the famous lawyer of the Roman time. The Fraus Legis, mentioned before by Professor Van Raad and yesterday by Professor Schwery, is defined in Roman law. So it's a concept which is not developed or created by judges today. It was, everything was written. Of course, concepts and idea must be shaped and adapted to a different context. But the way of thinking and the application of those principles are the same. And again, Fraus Legis occurs when a certain behavior is not wanted without being clearly vetted by the legislator, of course. So here begins, what, in my opinion, what is a feature of our system, of our legal system, and probably even of your own legal system. Our own is a sort of multi-layer system. Regulation, rules, general principles, the Constitution. Some behavior can avoid the first layer, but be stopped or vetoed by the third or the fourth layer. And in the case of avoidance, well, the point is, are you violating a law? No, you aren't. You are violating a principle. Then the point is, of course, this is not an answer. I'm just trying to set aside the problem, but I'm an Italian and sometimes we do that, setting aside and trying to look at it from a different perspective. And again, we understand from this very beginning presentation, very beginning point of my presentation, that the struggle against tax avoidance and evasion and the possible implementation of a general anti-avoidance rule is based both on black letter rules and on general principles. As probably you already know, but we will go into details later on, that today in Italy we don't have a GAAR, a general anti-avoidance rule made by the legislator. But we do have a general anti-avoidance rule developed by the case law, in particular by the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court was able to do that working on principles, on culture, on legal tradition of our country, and of course, as Professor Van Raad mentioned before, by the also relying on the fundamental interpretive contribute by the European Court of Justice of a number of cases that were discussed before. And in this respect, the last evidence of the development of the abuse of law is taken again by the Romans. The Romans, as well as this is the last quotation of that system. Well, yesterday I had a very short journey here to this conference with Professor Schwery, and his position was very clear, very convincing, saying to me, well, Marco, it's not that appropriate to talk about an abuse of law, because we have two options. If you have a right or you don't have a right. If you are doing something in the framework of a right, you are not abusing of it. But if the legislators say, if the judges say that you are abusing of your right, probably in that very moment you are infringing somebody else's right. So it's not an abuse any longer.